Hello, I'd like to talk about the new Fujifilm X-PRO3, specifically details that nobody else has gone over in any video, where you usually see this camera from a few feet away and people talk about it, and while that's all well and wonderful, people want to know some interesting facts, specifically also too, if they're familiar with the X-PRO2 or they own an X-PRO2, which I also own, the distinguishing differences between the X-PRO2 and the X-PRO3. Now this is the more expensive finish. Obviously this is not the $1,800 base model, but the quote-unquote scratch-proof finish. It's actually vacuum deposited, basically like an AR coating, but I mean, this is not about the finish on this camera. This is applicable to all the X-PRO3s, and actually let's go over those. Now the front command dial is not clickable. You cannot actually press it in. It actually has much better, if I could zoom in so you could see it, actually has much better knurling, so if your fingers are slightly greasy or dirty, much better tactile response, you're going to get grip. It's more spiky on the actual knurling on the front and rear dials than the X-PRO2 is. Absolutely, most definitely so. It actually has slightly better ergonomics, more of a hand swell, but it's very minimal. Let's talk about something else. There's actually several points. On the exposure compensation dial, unlike the X-PRO2, which actually sits flush with the back of the top cover, which makes it easier to hit and adjust the exposure compensation dial on the X-PRO3, you can actually see is recessed, so the possibility of doing this is far less so. The actual shutter release is softer, and I don't mean softer as in squishy softer. I mean softer in that it actually has better breakover. The breakover being the point at which you're taking up the slack and then finally breaking the shutter release over to take the shot. So it actually has better response on the X-PRO3 than does the X-PRO2. Now the rear command dial is the exact same knurling, and it is clickable, of course. The actual buttons are more flush with the back of the body than it is on the X-PRO2. Also, too importantly, let's get over here. And of course, if you own an X-PRO2, as I do, you know that the rubber around the viewfinder, and it's much larger on the X-PRO3, obviously, as you can tell here, but the rubber that's on the X-PRO2 is a dust magnet. I mean, you literally turn around and it's just full of dust, and of course I have to use a Q-tip covered in rubbing alcohol to remove the dust infrequently, but this is a, you can actually see, if I could actually shine my light here and get a focus, you can actually see that this part of the back of the viewfinder is separated from this polymer base, and this is a soft sort of plastic. I don't know which sort of plastic this is, but it is a soft, slightly squishy feel, but this is not going to attract dust at all like the rubber that actually forms not only the interior but the outer perimeter gasket on the X-PRO2, and that's, I mean, these minor little things are corrections, of course. I slightly take you to the bottom. Yes, the camera is made in Japan, and of course they lovingly put here that it is titanium. It's been noted by several people, and they're incorrect on this. I mean, they're correct, but also incorrect. The actual flexi-cable that feeds, let me get a focus here. The flexi-cable that goes from the main board that actually feeds the LCD, just is slightly more visible on the X-PRO3 here, but all articulating screens, whether it's the articulating screen on the X-PRO3 or on the XT3, or even on the GFX, or even a Nikon for that matter, is the same. There's a rubberized coating flexi cable that feeds the LCD and powers it also, that's fed off the main board. So it's more visible here when you tilt it down because people notice, oh, well, there's the ribbon cable that feeds the LCD. But this is absolutely no different in any way, shape, or form than that of the XT3. It's just slightly more hidden. But if you look for it, you can find it instantly. Now there's two ways you can actually go into screen setups and change this. Let me actually change the lighting here. You can actually, of course, as Fujifilm shows everybody film simulations on the the sub display on the back, and what this basically is. And of course, where would you put a sub display, which is up here on the XH1 and on the GFX? Where are you going to put that on the X-PRO3? Well, the only place you could put it is here, but you can actually change this to where I have it and also customize it. I actually have, of course, an aperture priority currently, and I have it set for my second location to be exposure compensation, but my biggest numbers to be my f-stop, and customize all the way to the bottom, including battery indicators, shutter type, and photometry, or what we call metering. But these are some of the distinguishing differences, the nuances, the je ne sais quoi of the tactile feel and interface of the X-PRO3 as contrasted with that of the X-PRO2, if you're familiar with it. A softer shutter release, much better tactile interface on the front and rear command dial, much more grippy. But the front command dial is not clickable, absolutely not clickable at all. I have completely familiarized this myself with this camera, top to bottom, and I've customized all my function buttons, and I actually am not lacking, as also is the case with the GFX 50R, which does not have a D-pad. I have all my primary functions set. I actually have this set for photometry, which is actually default out of the box. I actually have this for my flash settings. And I have this set for performance and boost mode, and everything else is in the Q menu. And since I am a glasses wearer, I actually greatly appreciate the eye relief, even though there's slightly less magnification than the X-PRO2, very slightly. I actually appreciate the fact that the optical, the viewfinder window is nicer. Obviously so, since this, let's put the X-PRO2 in a nutshell, which is actually pretty easy to do. What is the X-PRO2? It's basically the interior guts of an X-T3, same image processing engine, same sensor, same phase detect, same everything, essentially, so far as image output as the X-T3. But of course, you have this particular camera that's designed for, it's the digital rangefinder. It's actually designed for, obviously, if you know what the X-PRO2 is for, then you know what the X-PRO3 is for. But you actually have now the performance boost, better build quality. You don't have to worry about dust. Not that that's really an issue. It actually always irked me on rubberized coating things. You can't clean it 5 seconds later. You've got hairballs collecting. It literally acts like a dust magnet. And this absolutely will not my opinion, but a fact. I wish Fujifilm, it's cute to show what just one thing back here. It's like, well, Provia negative or classic, and that's all well and fine, but, I much prefer, and this is just me subjectively, much prefer setting up the sub-display for this, which is basically what I have the sub-display on top of my XH1 for displaying these important settings, and I don't need to flip down the LCD display. I can get everything through my optical viewfinder, look through it, and hit the buttons where I know they are, like the Q button, and my other function buttons that I have set for the things that I actually adjust all the time. I do not need either the D-pad, nor do I need the LCD display. I actually also reset the defaults for this button for playback, which is where I have it on my XT3 and my GFX cameras. I'm trying to think of any other slight nuances of a difference on the X-PRO3 as opposed to the the X-PRO2. And I actually can't think of anything additional. I think I've actually gone over all of it. Yeah, all these function buttons are much more flush to the body than they are on the X-PRO2, much more so. I mean, they stick out some very slightly. I'll get a close-up here, but they're definitely more flush. I actually appreciate the fact that the front and rear command dial are much more tactilely interfaceable, and your fingers will never slip off of these no matter what, whether they're wet or greasy or dirty or whatnot. But there it is. There's the titanium. That's, of course, the top and bottom plate are titanium. New Fujifilm X-PRO3. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch some of you at the Photo Plus convention tomorrow.